Hey all, good afternoon, and welcome to the Atlanta Region State of TDM webinar. We have a great lineup of speakers today that we'll hear from shortly. I'm Joseph Yan with the Mobility Services Group here at ARC, and I, along with Melissa Roberts, will be the moderator for today. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items so you know how to participate in today's event. We've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. You should see something that looks similar to this on your computer screen. You will be in listening mode only as default, but if you prefer to join by phone, you should be able to have there's a drop down for phone call that you can have the call-in information and join by telephone. You'll also have an opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing in your questions into the question pane of the control panel. You may send in questions at any time during the presentation. We'll collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So I want to introduce our speakers for this afternoon. We're very excited about the lineup that we have. And I'll start with our first speaker for today. Our first speaker is Rosalind Tucker, who's the Managing Director of the Mobility Services Department here at ARC. Next up is Josh Rowan with the City of Atlanta. Josh is the City of Atlanta's DOT Commissioner. And then following Josh will be John Orr. John is the Managing Director of Transportation Access and Mobility Services here at ARC. After John, David Strauss will follow. David is the Executive Director of the Association of Commuter Transportation. Finally, we'll hear from Bennett Foster. Ben is the Manager of Outreach with the Mobility Services team, also at ARC. And with that, I want to pass it over to our first speaker, Roz Tucker. Roz, kick it away.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Melissa. Want to say good afternoon to everyone here today. Thank you for joining in with us. And just want to kind of tell you a little bit about the reason why we are sharing with you on today. There's been a lot of movement in the TDM world over the last 3 months. I think you all may have heard in some of the comments that we've made on whether it be social media or some of the local TV interviews that Georgia Commute Options and ARC has had a chance to be a part of, is that we knew that this would be a tipping point for TDM and commuters in the region as it relates to the response to COVID-19 and what employers have been doing by way of teleworking. And so today we really wanted to come together and just share with you. We've had a lot of questions from the TDM network at large, and we've been doing a ton of work behind the scenes. I want to give credit to the ARC Mobility Services team and the collective Georgia Commute Options teams. There has been a lot of work and momentum going on. On March 16th, we kicked in motion assisting our local counties and our local governments with a quick start telework training, working in conjunction with our community development group. And we started moving on to, again, also at the same time, supporting our local employers. And so today we're going to talk, you'll see a little mixture of how we responded during the pandemic, but we're also going to talk about the research and the data that we've been able to compile as a result of the pandemic. And Ben is really going to dive into that. And then we're going to walk you into some of the steps that we have in place to take and help the region get further down the road based on the data that we've seen. And then I'll wrap up today with, we've done a survey of our loggers, and we recently we had a response of about 4,200 folks who utilize a clean commute across the region, and we wanted to know how they plan to get to work when their office work sites reopen. And so we're just going to give you a snippet of that towards the end. I'm really proud of the group that we have in this presentation today. And as you know, ARC's Georgia Commute Options team is part of a national network. We really are supported by the ACT Organization Association for Commuter Transportation, and we're really excited to have ACT represented here today by the president, David Strauss. And so we've been staying lock and step with what's going on across the nation with transportation demand management. So without further ado, I'm going to just walk you through. We have a lot of folks here on the line today that may have never heard of TDM, and you're sort of wondering, what is TDM? What does ARC do by way of TDM? So I'll just give you a little bit of history of our program and talk a little bit about what we do. So these are the areas of the Georgia Commute Options team. Of course, we have our employer outreach and education group. We have commuter outreach directly. We also have Georgia Commute Schools, and that is our K through 12 program. We have a TDM technology division, looking at ways to stay in front of the technology trends in TDM. We also have a very robust data analysis team that works in conjunction with ARC's research and analytics team. And then we have marketing and communications that works tirelessly to get the word out about the programs that we're offering, and most recently, all of the COVID training seminars for teleworking. And then, of course, we have our incentives program. And it's important to note that ARC's TDM program, which is housed in the Center for Livable Communities, is part of the Atlanta Region's Plan. And some of you may be familiar with that. The Atlanta Region's Plan is a work of ARC's transportation group. And so our work is governed by the Region's Plan, world-class infrastructure, healthy, livable communities, and a competitive economy. And I just, again, want to show you how and where GCO is housed within ARC. So we have the overarching ARC Metropolitan Planning Organization, and then we are housed in the Center for Livable Communities, and you'll see under the Mobility Services Group. The beauty of this is that we have the synergy and we have the collaboration with all of the other centers and all of the other teams within ARC. As I mentioned, we work very closely with transportation, we work closely with community development, with research and analytics, being able to provide us with those mega systems that you need to be able to get data pulled down, such as streetlights and the various Tableau in those various systems. So we're very proud to be a part of the ARC family, and we do a lot of work with ARC's workforce development group as well. And here is just a demonstration of the Regional TDM program. I'm really proud of the work that is done. We serve a 20-county area. Georgia Commute Options serves a 20-county area. And then within, outside of those areas or inside of those areas, we have the TMAs that actually serve the employment centers, some of the major employment centers in the region. And you'll see those noted here. So you might be asking, what is TDM? What does this mean to me? Why should I be concerned about it today? Or what can I learn new today? And so essentially, TDM is the use of strategies to really inform and encourage travelers to maximize the efficiency of a transportation system and reduces congestion and lowers vehicle emissions. And so essentially what we work very hard to do every day is to get individuals not to drive alone. So if they have to drive, we are encouraging carpools, van pools. We certainly are encouraging transit use. We're also encouraging active commutes, active walking, biking commutes. We're seeing that trend up in the region as well. Georgia Commute Options, you'll hear our huge slogan, it's all about behavior change. You know, over past years, Atlanta has been more of a car-centric region, but we have seen over the last 3 years there is a wonderful shift to other modes. This is really just a call out from a recent regional commuter survey that our research group within TDM conducted in the latter part of 2019. And so this here shows the modes by years. We go out and complete this survey approximately every 4 to 5 years. And again, this is just showing the mode usage within the region. And as you can see, I'll point out, Ben's really going to talk to this slide a lot more, but I want to point out, even when we conducted the 2019 commuter survey, it showed where telework has trended quite a bit, and you can see that noted here. Of course, we have a lot of users on transit and the other modes, but telework has been, even prior to the pandemic, was outpacing all of the modes. We're very proud of the incentives program that is offered through our commuter program. This gives us a way to really reward users of the program. We offer incentives, including our Guaranteed Ride Home program. And we're really, really proud to say that as of January 1 this year, we are now using a TNC. And so currently we're offering Guaranteed Ride Homes via Uber. And that has been a huge success, and commuters are extremely happy. We call them our customers. Our customers are extremely happy about this option. And we enhanced our ride matching and trip planning technology really to be able to change behavior. It is directly linked to the use of technology. And so again, in January of this year, we launched our enhanced ride matching and trip planning technology. And some of the key elements of this program is really the integration with other apps like bike share, scooter, Lyft, Uber, Waze Carpool. And then there are the enhanced incentives. The incentives are included inside of this particular app. We used to have an 800 number you'd have to call to get your guaranteed ride home if you had to work late and couldn't get your express bus or your MARTA bus home, or your Cobb or Gwinnett bus. But now you can actually just go into the app and you request the ride and you download, and all of it's done seamlessly through the app. Also, there are enhanced incentives that are really local. It's geocoded, so it knows where you are, and if you are a user and you've gotten points in the system, you will see the various locations, whether it's a restaurants or various businesses that are offering discounts to our users in the system. And we're really proud of the new system powered by Agile Mile. The key part of what we do is that we provide direct outreach to employers and property managers throughout the region. And currently we have, between employers and property managers, we have over 739 partners. And that represents over 350,000 commuters across the 20-county area. Some of the things that we do, we provide worksite assessments and mapping for organizations, travel time to determine the cost for commuters. And we also provide travel analysis, relocation strategy, and telework program setup and implementation. We also collaborate with our local and county governments. I mentioned earlier that during the height of the pandemic, in the middle of the crisis, we were able to jump right in and provide quick start guides through the trainings that were hosted by our Center for Livable Communities to assist local and county governments with launching their quick telework programs. And I'm really excited to say that a number of them have reached back to us to really work together with them, alongside of them, to implement formal telework programs that they are now considering as we are re-entering our work sites. And as we know, many of our local and county governments are some of the largest employers across the region as well. And so we see where oftentimes they may be dealing with things such as parking issues and congestion in certain corridors near or around their job centers. Modal promotions is a big thing. It's what we do, and we're really excited because modal promotions gives us a way to engage commuters at a large scale. It's a great way to get in the door with employers across the region. Many of our largest employers love all of the promotions that are listed here. And I must say we work in partnership, close partnership with all of our transit partners, with MARTA first, who has been extremely generous in providing passes for individuals who do not take transit to give it a try. And we also have Gwinnett County Transit, Cobb Transit, and Express, who have all been amazing partners for Get on Board, Try Transit, and all of our other modal promotions. And we've seen a 47% retention rate in individuals who actually try transit and continue to take transit. This slide really highlights for you that we have a robust, I mentioned a part of our teams is our marketing and communications group. So they do a lot of work day to day, behind the scenes, sometimes they're out in front, making sure that the messaging to, number one, the commuters is getting out there, that we are impacting behavior change. We're telling the story in a way that resonates to the region. And then we're also capturing the stories of our 4 amazing transit partners. We are deliberate about focusing on the work that they're doing and making sure that we're telling that story as well, because one of our greatest tasks is to get people to use a clean commute, and that being our transit partners. And also now we're talking about teleworking in that vein. And so you'll see a lot of posts on LinkedIn, you'll see them on our social sites just talking about teleworking. I saw one recently, now that we're into this 3 months, just encouraging parents how to stay sane during this time while they're teleworking, and some things they could do with their children at home during the summer. It's some wonderful posts that we have out there to support the region. We're also well-known, GCO, for providing regional trainings for the TDM network. And this past October, we actually hosted 25 years of TDM in the Atlanta region. I talked a little bit about the history of TDM, kicked off in 1994, the program being funded by GDOT. And then in 2013, the name was changed to Georgia Commuter Options. And then ARC took over management of the full program in 2017. And so we're really excited that we're able to blend our resources on a regional scale to provide the various trainings to support TDM practitioners across the region. Evaluation is really what underpins all of this work. I sort of have a quote of my own that if you do it but you can't measure it, it's almost as if you hadn't done it. And so ARC's work, embedded in the greater work of the ARC, is that we measure everything that we do. And we're able to measure the impacts of TDM. In 2018, we established a regional TDM evaluation framework that it defines the objectives and the strategies for TDM across the region. And I won't go over this entire slide, but you can see here we look at things like the awareness, influence, participation, and then whether or not we're actually having impact on creating more clean commutes and mode shifts across the region. This again ties back to the region's plan of reducing SOV travel, keeping Atlanta an attractive place to do business, and expanding travel options for commuters. I'm really proud to share with you this slide. Ben's going to talk about it more in depth, so I'll just touch on it a little bit. But over the last several months, we've been very busy as a team and as a regional network, including our TMAs, providing support to employers across the region. And so we're excited to sort of capture for you today in a summary report. We wanted to know how telework went over these last few months. We also wanted to know how what people were thinking. And along with that, we did a survey of workers, managers, and executive leaders. We also hosted some interviews with CEOs and business decision makers at 13 corporations here across the region. And this is just a snapshot of some of the work. I talked about some of the work of our marketing team, how they got out there and they were sending out posts and encouraging people how to work better remotely, how to social distancing, and also one of my favorites, if you can see in the top left-hand corner on your screen, we even featured an article of the amazing transit workers who were essential workers and continued on during the pandemic. And now I'm excited to present to you Josh Rowan, Commissioner of the Atlanta Department of Transportation. And I'll be back a little later on to share with you our findings from our recent logger survey. Thank you, Josh.
Oh, thank you, Roz, and thanks everyone for this opportunity. My name's Josh Rowan, Commissioner of Transportation in the city of Atlanta, and some really exciting things we have going on, and feel this is an excellent companion when you talk about impacts to some of the programs you have in place. One of the most important impacts is the reduction, if not elimination, of serious crashes as well as fatalities within our city streets. So gonna pivot a little bit and talk about what's going on with the city with our Vision Zero legislation. Real quick, these are the people who do the real work behind the scenes. I'd encourage you to get to know all of them. Really exciting ideas coming from this group. I won't read it to you, but hopefully you get a copy of the presentation. So we want to talk about our adoption of Vision Zero, some of the challenges we have in the city, preview some next steps. Now, item 4, we don't need feedback from the GDOT team. This is actually a presentation that I adapted based on one we gave to them. So a great partner we have at GDOT, and one of the things we talk about is finding mutual success stories as it pertains to safety. So if you look at Atlanta, we have some dubious distinctions when it comes to our crash rates. You see that in total deaths per 100,000, Atlanta and Dallas are leading the pack. We're very similarly developed cities, no real geographic boundaries, with a focus on the automobile. The one that's really troubling to us, though, is if you look at the right-hand column in Atlanta, our fatality rate for pedestrians is actually higher than all causes in cities like Seattle, Minneapolis, and Boston. So we've got a long way to go. And so one of the areas that we're focusing on is this pedestrian safety, because it represents such a big challenge to the city of Atlanta. In 2019, 73 people lost their lives on our streets. And here's the breakdown. And so there's been some talk that the city is waging a war against cars, and that's just absolutely not true. We know that there's going to be a place for the automobile in the future of the city. We would just prefer them be slower, maybe take fewer trips, carpool, promote transit, and really focus on the micromobility side. But you can see that not good numbers for the city. The 22 is pedestrian fatalities really jumps out. But even if all you cared about was driving your car, with 40 crashes that resulted in fatalities, that's not at all a good thing. So if you jump into the data a little deeper, this is something we have shared with the state. And if you know your Atlanta geography, you can start picking out your state routes. You can pick out Moreland Avenue, you can pick out Donnelly Hollowell, you can pick out MLK. And so we're starting to see, even on city streets with roads like Lenox, you can start seeing a systematic manner in which our fatality crashes are occurring. So in many respects, the data is telling us where our problems are. Historically, we've used more anecdotal type evidence, and I think maybe have ignored where the more severe issues are. But you can see nearly half of our traffic deaths were on state routes. So we're working very closely with GDOT to assess ways to address that situation. So many of you may know the Mayor Bottoms administration issued a strategic plan for transportation with the formation of the DOT. So we have a lot going on at one time. And in addition to my role as the first commissioner of transportation, we have brought in 4 different operating groups within the city, all under the umbrella of the Department of Transportation. And what we like to tell people is we're shifting from implementing one-off projects to really focusing on the delivery of the strategic plan. So specific to this, one of our top goals was the development of a Vision Zero ordinance and Atlanta becoming a Vision Zero city. So you can see a number of the items that were involved in this first wave, things such as adopting NACTO's urban design guidance and also defaulting our speed limit to 25 miles an hour. We are firmly committed to slower traffic within the city. The physics is pretty simple. The slower speeds save lives. And with things like the red lights and the traffic signals throughout the city, I don't believe for a minute it's actually impacting people's travel times through the city. In fact, I've been driving 25 miles an hour within the city of Atlanta for nearly a year and haven't had to change any of my travel patterns in the city. And that's if I'm not riding my Edison. I noticed on Roz's slide a tweet about giving an Edison bike away. I can't recommend them highly. We joke that they are the official, unofficial bike of the Atlanta DOT, and or we're riding MARTA. So great ways to get through the city. So as we move forward, let's see, trying to advance the slide here. The next step is to build a task force of transportation leaders within the city and actually within the region. So the timing is very good for this opportunity today, because one of the things that we're going to be doing is reaching out to our neighboring jurisdictions to form a roundtable to discuss the future of transit, not only in the region, but specifically to the city of Atlanta. We want to be a little more uniform and a little more process driven in how the buses move in and through the city. So you'll be hearing from us very soon. The task force, unfortunately, related to Vision Zero has been paused just ever so slightly because we want to have folks from our healthcare industry involved, and as you know, they have more pressing things with COVID to be focused on. But we continue to assemble that group. You know, this is a chart we like to show people. It's pretty simple. The thing that a lot of people don't talk about is that speeding is on an annual basis killing as many people as DUI. And in fact, in Atlanta, roughly half of our traffic deaths are speed related. And so speed's the enemy here. And you can see from this chart that just a minor increment, a minor slowdown really improves safety for those who are outside of their cars. And so that's something we're going to be focusing on as we move forward. We've linked up with other cities, with Seattle, with Boston and Portland, and are learning lessons from them. They've been very, very valuable in this as we begin our journey into Vision Zero. But it's all for the purpose of lowering speed. So many people will say, well, okay, you've lowered the speed limits, you put new signs up, big deal. People won't change their behavior. That's not proving to be true. Where we're seeing in Boston that is the case is actually on the top end. I think we're all programmed to add 10 miles an hour to the speed limit, and that's the rate of speed where we set ourselves. We do have our super speeders and those who just blatantly ignore whatever the posted speed limit is, and we're going to have to find ways to address them. But for most reasonable people, I think we're conditioned to default to whatever's on the sign plus 10, which would explain some of the data that we're seeing from other cities. One of the challenges that Atlanta has is our inconsistency, and these pictures show it. So you can be on a local street in a neighborhood and have a range of speed limits from 25 to 30 to 35. As seldom as some of these are signed, you never know what the speed limit is. Even on our collectors, we have ranges of speeds. And so that inconsistency is something we're going to be attacking immediately through the summer and fall with the speed limit reduction. And you can see our peer cities have much more consistency. The variability in Atlanta's speeds is causing quite a problem. So one of the things that we had to do is we had to make a difficult decision about our streets that are on the state laser list. And what we ultimately decided was to leave them alone for the time being, because our police department said they wanted to keep the tool to enable to catch the top end speeder. And we thought that was important enough that we would address the streets that we controlled and the ones that weren't seeing a lot of enforcement. So in all, you see, we're going to be replacing about 1,000 speed limit signs as we lower to 25 miles an hour. I'm not going to talk a lot about the laser list, other than to say what makes it challenging is that it actually can only it's approved by segment, and many of you who are transportation professionals know it's a difficult process, and so we're going to be working with the state to see if we can't batch some of our roads as we start recertifying for the laser list. So let's talk a little bit more about our agenda moving forward. We do want to talk about a pilot project for automated speed enforcement. One of the things that we think is going to be very important is that we not be over reliant upon policing. And we believe there's a strong role for technology. There are some challenges in how the state has implemented the opportunity for speed enforcement, and we're working through those. Essentially, it has to be in a school zone and it has to be initiated by the school district. But we have a pilot in development that we think could aid in slowing traffic down. Last fall, the Mayor Bottoms announced her action plan for safer streets, which is roughly speaking about 20 miles of on-street bike lanes, lit lanes, and our attitude towards those is really simple. Atlanta streets are very wide, and we think we can be even more aggressive with repurposing the width for things like scooters, bicycles, even in some areas it may be quick builds for pedestrians to connect them to transit. So a lot coming there, and then we continue to work with other cities to see what's working for them and tweak our approach. And what I tell people is that this is a long-term commitment. I had somebody call and say, hey, there's a car speeding. There are cars speeding in my neighborhood. Can I get some of that Vision Zero? So this isn't like that magic spray that you see in World Cup soccer that fixes all injuries, but it's a commitment through policy, through engineering, and through enforcement to providing slower, safer streets in the city of Atlanta. And so as we drill deeper into the data, some interesting things start to present themselves. And I don't know how many of you follow closely the business with City Council, but we announced last week that one of the things that we're going to be reevaluating is our neighborhood traffic calming. We spend a good bit of money on neighborhood traffic calming, but the data is showing that you're 18 times more likely to have a serious crash or death on our arterials. And so that's going to require some changes to city code to enable us to do things on these roads that we currently aren't allowed to do, specifically related to vertical deflection. And so it's the same thing as we look at we did a crash per mile analysis, and you start seeing the same patterns developing. So we know where the challenges lie, and here's a list right here. Really, it's a not so stellar top 9, top 10 of our most dangerous corridors in the city, and some more will be done to be addressing these. But again, the data is pretty clear where we have the predictable systematic issues versus some of the one-offs that we do continue to have throughout the city of Atlanta. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Orr, and I'm sure there will be some questions later. So I'm going to hang around. I'll turn my camera off and enjoy the presentation from my good friend John Orr.
Well, thank you very much, Josh, and congratulations on all the great work happening in the city of Atlanta. One of the items I did very much want to share with everyone today is like, of course, with COVID-19, everyone's very interested in what the impact of the illnesses have been on air travel demand. And one of the easiest ways that we can understand that quickly is we can look at some statistics related to travel, but a lot of the stories also told via what revenues are being generated right now from some of our traditional measures of motor fuel vehicle use and such. So one item that wanted to stress is, what I will do is really, as Joseph is working to give me control, great, is wanted to share some information about travel demand in the region. And a couple of key points is that, first of all, the revenues we receive for transportation, they're very much tied to usage taxes, such as motor vehicle revenue receipts and such. And in the second bullet, you can see illustrated that we have seen National Highway Trust Fund receipts are down 49% in May compared to May of 2019. And so you'll see some more statistics in a minute that will also support the point that what we are all experiencing right now as it relates to changes in travel demand are unprecedented items we've never seen really in our careers. You start to look at the state level, and motor vehicle receipts were down about 26% in May. And also you can tell the economic conditions, primarily looking at local sales tax receipts, which were down about 14% in the month of April. Sales tax receipts, it does typically take a period of about 6 to 8 weeks to get that information in at the local level. But we'll give a little bit more information on that in just a moment. Okay. One item that is very important is that we wanted to make sure, and I'm getting a pretty good lag on some of my slides changing, is that wanted to share some information with you about the impact of travel in the region, and also the metro Atlanta area. And this is looking at 20 counties in metropolitan Atlanta. And what this graphic is sharing with you is information about really vehicle miles of travel in our 20 county region, going all the way back to March the 1st and all the way through June the 5th. And as you can see, what happened in really mid-March is that we saw vehicular travel collapse in metropolitan Atlanta. With many of our communities, vehicular travel was down nearly 70% at the depths in mid-April. And what you have seen illustrated on the graphic, actually we're now, as some businesses have reopened, travel demand is starting to pick up for vehicular travel. To where now we're still down, depending on the communities, roughly 30 to 40%. But you can see it's has grown up significantly compared to the depths of really when the major closures were in place and really early and mid-April. So question would be is like, well, where did these trips go? Well, within the context of travel demand, a lot of these certainly went to what Roz was discussing, transportation demand management strategies, including teleworking. Now, moving forward into the next item I did want to share some information on was that, and it's a very critical item to share, it's going to be SPLOST and TSPLOST collections. Because ultimately we depend on these funds for a lot of transportation related items, including a lot of our both really roadway and transit revenues are actually paid from local sources. And the short story is that we've seen about a 14.5% decrease in our sales tax collections. And this is another indicator of how travel demand and really demand in general has decreased. And a lot of these trips that we used to make via vehicle or even transit to a lot of retail businesses are now being made in an online environment. And that really getting our arms around some of these trends will be very, very critical moving forward in the future. Now, as I shift to the next slide, which should be coming up in just a moment, the one item we wanted to break out was like the sales tax collections by county, which, and also even the city of Atlanta. And I realize this graphic, we will have the slides available after this webinar. You can see some of these numbers a little bit better, but they range broadly. And if you compare the month of April this year to last year, we've had most of our communities have seen declines really ranging from roughly 10% to about 36% within the city of Atlanta. And certainly the reason for that in the city of Atlanta, a major contributing factor is the hotel and convention business certainly has been heavily impacted. Now, one item, and here in a moment on the last slide, this raises some long-term questions as it relates to transportation demand management in general, because not all of this change in transportation demand may be short-term in nature. And in fact, some of this may be mid to long-term systematic changes that we'll need to very much plan for as we move forward. As it relates to state transportation, really the changes in demand on state transportation collections, you can see the story continues to play out about decreased travel has lowered the revenues going into the state of Georgia for transportation by over 29%. Now, what this ultimately means, and this is also very critical, is that we'll be monitoring very closely if these changes in travel demand, are they long-term? And if so, does that impact our future regional transportation plan and our transportation improvement program as well? Now, I wanted to leave you with a couple of points that as it relates to not just revenues, but also the impact on the regional transportation plan and our transportation improvement program, which we use the acronym, the TIP. Really, ultimately, and it's the second question I did want to highlight first, is like, has COVID-19, is this a short-term or a long-term or both long-term trend that we need to be planning for as we move forward? Well, I think the short story is that we, of course, consult and discuss with our counterparts nationally, and we do believe that this is certainly going to be a long-term major change in the way a lot of people work and travel moving forward. And if you can see the last set of questions at the bottom of the slide, how radically will work travel patterns be permanently altered? And the short story is that we think that this certainly is going to have major long-term impacts on our region and really the country as a whole. Roz, I know, mentioned some of the survey work that has been conducted already of our major employers in the region and the management teams with these employers. And it appears that many of our major employers are going to be shifting to at least part-time and some of them full-time telecommuting, really work programs and regimes moving forward. So if this happens, what will it ultimately do to our work, our commutes, or really our peak travel periods in the region, which we have been collectively working for a long time to help reduce congestion, increase transit use. And so this long-term will be a very beneficial really trend. Now, of course, on the revenue side, a lot of the revenues we receive for transportation, they're based on how much gasoline a typical household uses. And so we may have at some point in the future to revisit how we fund transportation. But certainly from an environmental standpoint, a congestion relief standpoint or management standpoint, the changes that we've seen in travel demand due to COVID-19 have a lot of environmental benefits. But ultimately, we realize that it's a balance about if we do see continued changes in travel demand, we very much may have to revisit how we conduct a lot of our regional transportation planning. So that being said, I'm going to pause here for a moment and turn the presentation over to David, who's with ACT, who has got a lot of great information to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to join you on the call today. As I'm sure many on the call don't know much about the Association for Commuter Transportation, let me just take a quick moment to let you know a little bit more on who we are. ACT is the premier association for TDM professionals, and our goal is to build a strong community of individuals and organizations working to advance and implement TDM at their work sites and within their communities, with the goal of creating an efficient transportation system that moves people, reduces congestion, improves air quality, and supports overall economic activity. So ACT is really your organization as well for the latest information and best practices in TDM on a national scale. ACT provides valuable professional development opportunities with dozens of virtual and in-person, as soon as we can get back to it, learning and networking events throughout the year. We support professional growth from the moment you enter the field until you retire through mentorship, leadership training and development, and actually our just launched certification program via the TDM CP exam, and want to give a quick kudos and shout out to Roz Tucker as being one of the first recipients of the TDM CP credential. ACT works to advance the entire TDM industry through advocacy and influence of federal, state, and local policies supportive of TDM. And right now we're at a really important point in time in regards to building support for TDM at the federal level, as efforts to pass a new authorization bill have begun in earnest with the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee's introduction of the new Invest in America Act. And I'll spend a few moments on this at the end of my presentation. As well as the largest network of TDM professionals, bringing together nearly 1,200 of your colleagues and peers from across the United States and around the world to really collaborate with each other. And this has been invaluable during these past few months as we've had to deal with the challenges brought on by the global pandemic. And it's been wonderful to watch hundreds of our members come together on weekly calls to share information, as well as a group of members that came together to develop a new resource document on supporting commuters returning to work during COVID-19. And I'll spend the next couple minutes talking about this resource that is available on our website to everyone. First and foremost, let's start off. Businesses should always be basing decisions on how and when to return to work on the guidance of local public health officials and the Centers for Disease Control. It's anticipated that new recommendations will be continually being developed as we learn lessons and adjust to current situations. So we encourage you to keep up to date on all of those. For instance, we have seen the CDC continue to provide more supportive guidance for non-drive alone options over the past several weeks. They initially came out with guidance essentially telling everyone that they need to drive alone to work, and received some significant backlash that just isn't feasible for a significant number of commuters out there who may not have access to vehicles and who, there may not be parking supply available. And so they've started to, issue new guidance that is more supportive of public transit and carpooling and other options as well. And second, employers should really be continuing to allow employees to work from home as long as possible. This will free up capacity within the transportation network as a whole and allow a safer and quicker commute for essential workers and others that are unable to work from home. So as your work sites continue and community continues to develop their plans to return to work, it's important to really start by assessing the situation based on your workplace geography, the specific needs of your commuters, the availability of the various commuting options that are there in your immediate area. But ACT has developed this resource to really provide some additional tips and guidance specific to each mode that is out there, and some suggestions to help make that commute to work as safe and reliable and efficient as possible. I'm just going to spend some time quickly going through it a bit. Let's see here. So on parking, as the fear is within our industry that a significant number of individuals are planning to give up their previous mode, especially around public transit users, and shift to driving alone. The fear is that we're going to have this congested streets that go beyond anything we've ever seen before, and there just simply isn't enough capacity. And parking provides a really interesting opportunity for us to change some behavior. And something we're looking at is, can you look at the pricing model and perhaps offer daily passes rather than monthly passes to encourage employees to rethink how often they are going to drive into work, which can reduce the drive alone rates, as well as help perhaps spread out the demand on parking that's going to be in there. Prioritize parking for carpools and van pools to encourage people to share as much as possible. And that's an area where we've seen the CDC relax some of their guidance and supporting carpooling within trusted communities that you may have. Looking at programs like the parking cash out that incentivize employees to use other commuting options that may not be available to them by providing cash in lieu of a parking pass. And as well, looking at your parking supply and where you've had reserved parking or assigned parking in the past, turning those parking spaces into carpool van pool parking, or opening them up to the to your general employee base to enable folks who may telecommute a few days a week to be able to drive in when they need to, if needed. So really looking at those policies to reassign the reserved parking that's there. On the public transit side, communication is really key, and making sure that your transit agency is aware of your reopening timelines is important. So they know how many employees will be coming back to work. This can help create transit plans to better serve your work site as service is brought back to the community. Sharing the materials with your employees. Schedules are changing rapidly right now. So being proactive and sharing this information with your employees so that they have the most up-to-date information as possible. Providing feedback, again, with communication. If your business is hearing that there's issues with a schedule or with the route of a transit line that may have been changed to respond to new demands, make sure to provide that feedback to the transit agencies so that they can continually adjust their patterns and service levels to ensure as smooth a transition as possible for your employees. And really the biggie, be flexible and understanding. With new schedules, with distancing requirements, a key right now is really being patient with your employees as well as with the transit agencies to ensure that everyone can get where they need to be going. On carpooling, really look at organized carpooling and the opportunity to work with a platform that supports matching as well as contactless payment options. Something else that a lot of the carpool programs are starting to look at is the ability to support contact tracing. There's some ethical issues and privacy issues that are coming into play with that, but I think it's an area that we're going to start to hear a lot of conversation around as more and more folks get back to work. As well, support your managers to be able to have conversations with their employees about finding carpool partners and assistance that they need to be able to carpool successfully. And then back to the carpool and vanpool parking is a key for incentivizing and encouraging those modes. On the vanpooling side, look at creating alternative schedules for employees in order to help support van pools that may be in place. In some communities, they're looking at splitting vans in half in order to to increase the distancing within the vehicle. So working with an employer to make sure that any impacted employees can be able to adjust their schedules to reflect the new timing of those vans. Be providing subsidies to your employees. Encourage the reduction of the overall capacity within the van in order to be supportive. This could impact subsidy reimbursements and some of the reporting to the National Transit Database, but work closely with your transit agency to figure out any requirements around the capacity and any short-term waivers that may be possible with that. And again, communicating with your provider to ensure that vans are being used. If you have vans that are sitting idle right now, looking for opportunities to provide those vans to groups that are on the road that may be interested in splitting up their van into a smaller capacity side. With shuttles, private shuttle operations may provide a greater sense of control for employers and trust for commuters, but will really need to be balanced with costs associated with new capacity requirements and maximums within the vehicles. And that's a discussion that many employers around the country are having right now, is the balance between the shuttle operation costs and the ROI of being able to handle half as many individuals within the vehicle. I encourage everyone to talk with their shuttle providers about how they can best address that. Shuttle providers should also have specific changes to policies for their drivers and their provide education with the purpose of really improving rider safety as a whole. Within physical distancing, many shuttle operations are looking at the removing of seats and exiting out of seats in order to provide as much space within the vehicle as possible. And something that many employers are starting to look at is the ability to set up reservation-based ridership program so that you can reserve a spot on a bus and know you have a seat at a certain time. And then lastly, telecommuting. And we've heard a lot about it, so I won't go into it much, but the key here is try and keep it going as much as possible. And understand that what we've been doing right now is not real telecommuting. What we've been doing over the last few months is an emergency response to the situation with kids and distractions and no real space for work. So try and keep it going, and then invest in the technology and the policies to help create a formal telework program within the work site. So the guidance that in this document is available up on our website. I seem to have lost control over the slides here. I'm not sure. I think someone else is moving.
Hang on, David, I'll get back to you. Sorry. 1 second.
No worries.
You can keep talking through what you were doing. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, no worries. So I did want to just do a quick transition to our More Through TDM Act, which is a piece of legislation that has been formally introduced in the Congress by act through Congressman Lipinski out of Chicago, and is really the first piece of major legislation that's focused on raising the profile and use of TDM within federal policy. The More Through TDM Act does several things, but first and foremost, it defines TDM. And this is something that right now there is no definition within federal code. And so we worked with our public policy committee along with feedback from congressional, oh, there we go. There we are. All right. To set up a definition for transportation demand management, and getting a definition is really important as it would provide clear direction to US DOT about the role and need for TDM. And so the legislation also sets out definitions for TDM strategies. The legislation defines TMAs and includes them as eligible recipients for funding through this program, in addition to regional commuter programs. It includes requirements for including TDM within the long-range transportation plans, making it clear that all regions need to invest in and support TDM as a way of reducing congestion and improving air quality. And then most significantly, through the Act, it establishes a new TDM program and calls for $100 million a year to support the implementation of statewide TDM plans. Eligible projects include a broad mix of themes you see on the screen and whose outcomes meet the goals established within TDM to reduce congestion, improve air quality while moving people. And for the first time, the More Through TDM Act would clearly make marketing and promotion eligible projects through federal highway, which would be exciting and helpful to many. In addition, the More Through TDM Act would expand the list of traditional eligible entities to include TDM service providers, associations, TMAs, TMOs, and of course, MPOs and transit agencies. So, and then the More Through TDM Act would also establish state and national advisory committees to support this cornerstone that we have of collaboration and really bringing public and private sectors to the table to develop state and state TDM plans and oversee the implementation of those plans. And at the national level, really bringing together a cross section of federal agencies to ensure that TDM is being utilized in emergency response, disaster preparedness, and transportation, housing, urban development activities. So currently, and this is my last slide, with the bill being introduced in early May, we're currently recruiting co-sponsors to build support for the legislation. But this bill is not going to pass on its own, and really it's to show support for the ideas of TDM to help influence the next federal transportation authorization bill. And we're working closely with House T&I staff and Senate staff to really identify opportunities to infuse TDM within that authorization bill. And it was really exciting. We were, thrilled to see in the release of the Invest in America Act, which is the House version of the Transportation Authorization Bill, that TDM is included in several places of that bill for the first time ever. It's a bold piece of legislation. It calls for nearly $500 billion over 5 years. And there's programs in there that are directly based off of our More Through TDM bill. The Gridlock Reduction Grant Program is for large cities to support employer-based commuting programs. It's like carpooling and vanpooling. There's a TDM data and modeling study that would really help set the strategies for maximizing the efficiency of our transportation system, which to improve mobility and reduce congestion. So it's a great achievement for ACT and the entire TDM industry, and really recognition of a lot of the outreach efforts that have been done by the membership and others to raise the profile of TDM within federal transportation policy. So I will end there and turn it back.
Great, thanks, David. We will go ahead and turn it over to Ben really quickly. Bennett, let me give you control here. All right, Ben.
All right, well, thank you, David. Really do appreciate having an organization like ACT out there seizing on this moment for TDM in the country. You mentioned kids and distractions, David, and I guarantee you we're going to get a couple of those during my talk. Now, I'm just going to give you a really brief tour of how the GCO team responded to the pandemic. So, back then, Roz pointed out that we had modal promotions. So we were actually busy working on Get On Board and Try Transit, where we were encouraging people to take public transit for the first time. And we were fresh off the release of our regional commuter survey. And so you can see back in the time of hugs and handshakes, the front page story of the AJC talked about how telework was one of the fastest growing commute modes here in the region. 41% of commuters teleworked at least occasionally. And this was a real big deal because telework displaced hundreds and thousands of car trips. And we also knew that very few of our commuters that don't telework have a telework program at their work site. So as you can see here, there's a huge opportunity. 80% represents nearly 500,000 commuters in the region, and increasing teleworking is all about creating programs at work sites. Like Roz mentioned, we offer free telework consulting services for businesses and organizations in both the public and private sector here in the region. And we've helped large companies like Cox and Mercedes-Benz establish formal programs. Now, this isn't easy. We're dealing with multiple stakeholders and different management structures. So it's just not easy to really get large organizations to try this mode and to implement a formal policy. And as John pointed out, VMT collapsed. This is actually mobility data from anonymized cell phone data that our Neighborhood Nexus team put together. If you have a chance, I'd love for you to check out 33 Degrees North in our Neighborhood Nexus page on ARC. It's loaded with full of great information specific to COVID. And like John said, it collapsed. And he asked a really great question: where did the trips go? And so this is a really messy slide, but what I want to show here is that by the end of April and the first week of March, we actually, GCO anticipated widespread remote work was on the horizon. So we immediately updated our website, our materials normally reserved for our consulting services. We made sure to get that out as quickly as possible. And so right here, right before public schools closed, we were getting all that stuff out to the public. We also launched our first webinar surveys immediately following public school closures. And what I really saw this as we were providing a backstop to the disruptive force of the pandemic. And so as mobility decreased, we were trying to get the best situational telework practices in the hands of the people and the companies that really needed them. And so just briefly, we got a quick start guide out that said telework templates on there, policy templates on there. We had managers and employees do's and don'ts, just some casual guidance on how to telework. And we also made sure we tailored it for brand new programs with little experience with teleworking. We just knew that there weren't that many programs out there and that this would be a serious disruption. Next, we devised a series of webinars, which I'll talk about in a second. And most importantly, we made everything accessible on our website so people knew that they can get this information from a trusted and reliable source. Did you see the little GIF? Did it change? So I know I'm running out of time, but I do want to take a moment to really thank our partners, our TMA partners. Together, we collectively responded to these challenges. We hosted webinars, and we really made an effort to get as much information out to both large and small employers throughout the region. And so we conducted 6 webinars. As you can see, what's important about this is nearly half of the people that attended were from newer emerging programs, and 86% recommended this program, these webinars. That was really important because as we were curating the website, we really wanted to make sure that it was accessible and easy to share, especially in the throes of the pandemic. So after our second series, people were asking like, so what's the transition back to the workplace going to look like? Well, we decided to ask people. And so we launched a survey, again, with the help of our partners, and we made sure to incorporate questions for executive leadership and managers, because unlike other modes that we try to push people into or encourage them to use, biking or transit, you can't just choose to telework. You have to have a program from the top down, and you have to have the support of managers to do it. And so we really wanted to understand what those pain points were and how we could smooth them out as things were returning to normal. And as Roz mentioned, we talked to 13 large companies and public sector executives to figure out what their transition would look like. A typical conversation, it really did look like not that many people were teleworking. Now almost everyone is, and this is going to be here to stay in the future. And so that's what we made assumptions, but we've seen these kind of events before where people would say, oh my gosh, we're never going back to work, we're going to telework. Well, sometimes things regress to the mean. I don't think it's going to happen this time, but that's why we're here. And so one of the reasons why it's not going to go back is because these are the positive experiences mentioned from executives all the way to their employees about the benefits of teleworking, even with that dog that was barking in the background and my kids are about to bust through my door. As David mentioned, this is not normal telework. So to see this type of productivity and this type of like positive response from these circumstances is really important. And what it will turn into is we're going to see durable shifts to remote work here in the region and perhaps in the country or in the world, right? So before COVID, we saw less than one telework per week, people teleworking less than once a week. After COVID, people are anticipating teleworking 2.5 times. Now for TDM, what we're thinking is like, wow, imagine how many hundreds of thousands displaced car trips we're talking about here. And so again, that's what our program wants to encourage. And so we're going to see some lasting impacts here. This New York Times Magazine article, I actually have it on my desk. I was really surprised that they featured this whole thing about telework and how it's going to be one of the enduring legacies from the pandemic. And finally, our website and our marketing is such an important part, getting the social media out to folks. That's why not only balancing all the telework services that we have, but also getting commuters back to their workplaces. And so check out our website. We have a whole new webpage just devoted to commuting in the time of COVID. And don't be surprised if you see more coffee chats and webinars from GCO. And looking ahead, here's my commitment to you in the region is we're going to have targeted telework outreach, consulting outreach, more surveys to help our partners, including the businesses and the public sector, to make the best choices for themselves and their employees. Tips for employers who are reopening their work sites, like David said, facilitating carpools and van pools are going to be extremely important. And finally, making sure we have resources for commuters who are getting to their work site. And so with that, I am going to see who I'm going to introduce next. And I believe, let's see.
Ben, we actually, yeah, thank you, Ben. Thanks for going through that. We know that we are short of time. I do wanted to turn it over to Melissa and I know we said at the beginning that we would get to Q&A. We're obviously right here at the end of the time. Melissa, were there any questions?
Yes, we did have a question from Sam Baker. And he asked, why do you think carpool and vanpool has declined between 2007 and 2019?
Roz or Ben, do you guys as panelists want to address that?
Yes, I'd be happy to. And we've got David on here as well. And David Strauss has been studying this decline as well over the last several years. But I will chime in just some of the anecdotal information that we received. There are a lot of other commute options like car sharing, the TNCs. And so people are less tied down to having to leave home at a specific time and having to leave their offices at a specific time. So that has played in. The TNCs have actually taken a bite out of the traditional carpooling, van pooling.
Cool, thank you, Roz.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
It really varies by region and area around the country. You know, with those changes in some areas, we're actually seeing some significant growth in carpooling, especially in the Bay Area, where there's some real lack of other options. But there's been an increase in new technologies to support verifiable and you know, carpooling partners and trusted communities.
Great. Thank you, David. Thanks, Roz. We know we covered a lot of content. We obviously wanted to bring you as much as possible and didn't leave as much room for Q&A, but I do hope that everyone found this beneficial. Melissa, if there's not any more questions, I'm going to transition it back over to Roz for just some closing remarks.
Okay, I mean, we did receive just one more question, but maybe Roz, you might be able to briefly answer that with the remarks if you have time. The last question is, I'm curious to learn what your expectations are of transit riders and TNC riders being less willing to use shared services and what the impact would be on congestion, parking, and needs for other facilities like bike lanes. Wait, Roz, I believe you, there you go.
Okay, thank you. That is a great question. So I'll tie that into actually my closing response here. And it really goes down to the data. We did want to share with you, we surveyed commuters in the GCO portal who actually, many of them that actually log in the system, log their clean commutes. And so we're studying to understand what they'll be doing in these next few weeks, months, and days, and then why they're making that choice. And we knew that we needed to understand that so that we could share that information to individuals that would have this very question. And so we look forward to sharing the specific analysis with this group. We will send that survey data out to you, and I think it will clearly answer some of the questions. We even drill down to specific modes and to our for transit partners as well. And so we're happy to be able to provide detailed data regarding. A good question. And I want to thank you all. The reason that we wanted to gather today, we knew that a lot had happened over the last 3 months. We saw an amazing in TDM. We wanted today to highlight the positives, but also we wanted to sort of note how we were going to be approaching some of the challenges that we might be seeing across as well. All of our speakers were tremendous today. I want to thank every last one of them. Our commitment as a regional TDM program, as the regional professionals to provide all of the resources and our service, whether it's to your local government, whether it's to your office, you are an employer here on the line, or if you're part of our TDM work, we are here to support you. And so we look forward to a broader conversation. Feel free to email us as we go next. You'll be hearing from us. We can provide these slides to you as well. And again, we'll be providing not only our telework survey, but our commuters. So thank you for joining us today, and you have our commitment to work alongside you as we move forward for TDM in the region.
Great. Thanks all. Thanks for joining.